Okay, so Happy New Year to everybody that is in their new year. Um, and we start this series, which is of the Dvars on the in the morning. We start them with a new book, the second of the books of the Torah, and it's called Shemot in Hebrew and Exodus in English. And really, it's because it tells the story of Moses and the Exodus. We've already done Genesis, which sort of lays the groundwork for all these people. And we've seen Joseph go down into Egypt as a slave. He's sold into slavery, and then he saves Egypt from starvation. And he does this fantastic thing for the Pharaoh, and that allows him to rise up the ranks, and he becomes the second in command in Egypt to the Pharaoh because he saved all the people from starvation. And then his brothers and father Jacob also come down into Egypt because it's there's a famine where they are, and they all reconcile, and down come these brothers with their families, and Jacob dies, and he is buried back in the land that's promised to him, which at the moment is called Canaan before it becomes named after Jacob Israel. It becomes Israel. So we enter the story at that moment, and a quick summary of Shemot would tell you that the children of Israel multiply in Egypt. They become more and more these people that have gone down, the 12 brothers and their families. They start off as 70 people, including Joseph and Jacob, yeah, is down there. And they multiply and multiply. And then the king forgets or resents Joseph's family and feels threatened. And he ends up, the Pharaoh, the king, enslaves the Hebrews, and he orders the Hebrew midwives, Shiphrah and Puah, to kill all the male babies at birth. And when they don't comply, he commands his people to cast the Hebrew babies into the Nile. And a child is born to a woman called Yocheved, and she's a daughter of Levi, one of the 12 tribes, one of the 12 sons of Jacob, and her husband Amram. And she places this is third child, she places the baby in a basket on the river, and the baby's sister Miriam stands and watches over it. And Pharaoh's daughter picks up the baby and names him Moses, which is actually an Egyptian name, like Tutmoses. Moses remembers finally who he is, and he gets in a fight and kills an Egyptian, even though he is sort of half Egyptian himself by this stage. He's been brought up in with the Egyptians. And because he's killed an Egyptian, he has to make a quick exit. And he goes to an area called Midian, and there's a priest there, Jethro, who we meet in a few portions later, who has a daughter, Sipporah, who he marries. And he becomes a shepherd, and he's known as a shepherd, the leader of a flock, the flock being Israel. And he has an encounter at the burning bush. A lot of people know the story. And his destiny is set at that moment, that he's not just the leader of the flock of sheep, but the leader of the Israelite nation out of Egypt, which in Hebrew is called Mitzrayim, which means a very narrow place. So that's the basis of this first bit of Exodus, or in Hebrew it's called Shemot. And that's because it actually starts with the word Shemot, which I put in bold, Ve'ele, and these are Shemot, names. It doesn't say the names, just names, B'nai Yisrael, of the children of Israel, who came into Egypt with Jacob. And all of them are named, all the sons, Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, Benjamin, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. and of course Joseph, who is already there. And these form the 12 tribes of Israel. Joseph's tribe gets split into his two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, because Levi ends up without land. He becomes the priestly one, and everybody, he doesn't get land. So Ephraim and Manasseh gets land. So it starts off right at the beginning with all the names, and it's called Shemot, which means names. And then it goes, Joseph died, and all his brethren, all the generation die out. But obviously the children are fruitful and they multiply. And a new king arises in Egypt, or one, we don't know if it's a new king or one who's just decided not to remember Joseph. And he's worried that these people are going to become too mighty for Egypt. And, you know, the typical, let's get the migrants. And so they enslave them, basically. And so there's a few themes that start off in this book. We have the continuation of the tribes. The Hebrews stay true to their ancestors and remember Joseph, and they're still keeping that whole story going. We have two midwives who are named, Shifra and Pua. It's very unusual for people outside the main story to be named. If they're named, it really means something. So they get named, and they're the first conscientious objectors to tyrannical rule, really. They're told to kill the babies at birth, the male babies, and they don't. And that kind of takes quite a bit of daring to do. And we have this warning from history that when you're no longer counted as a citizen, you should leave. And when you're no longer appreciated at a party or an event or whatever, leave. When jealousy reigns, leave. You can't do anything about it. And we have a whole lot of names and naming. It's called Shemot for that reason. And I'm going to talk a bit more about names and naming. God tells Moses at the burning bush what his destiny is going to be. And Moses says, who am I that I'm going to do that? You know, yes, he's born into the Levi family. Yes, he's taken up by Pharaoh's daughter and grows up as a stepson to the Pharaoh, and a stepbrother to the new Pharaoh. But actually, he's just a Hebrew that happens to be living in the land. And he says, who am I? And it's an interesting I that he uses. He doesn't say mi ani, which is the normal way, who am I? He says mi anochi. And anochi is a more formal capital I. Who, I'm not the big I. Anochi is the one that starts the 10 Commandments, actually. Anochi. God doesn't say ani, I am God. He says Anochi, I, big I am God. And Moses is like, who am I? I'm not that big I. I'm just me. And God has to convince him that he is going to be with him. God tells him that he's going to be with him. And Moses argues a lot about it because he's not very happy about having this job. And he says, and when I go down into Egypt to meet all my enslaved brethren, what on earth do I say to them? You know, here am I, who am I? And God says, you tell them I'm sent from the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. It's interesting, we always tend to say the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. We don't say the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, because they're different gods in some way. Everybody has their own relationship to God. And so each one of us has to be named in our relationship to God. My God, the God of me. So it's an interesting play on it. And he still is afraid. And God says, tell them that I am sent you. And the I am is this very famous phrase that people translate as I am that I am. And this is one of the names of God. Echye, Asher Echye. I am who I am is usually translated, but it actually is a future tense, and it means I shall be who I shall be. And that's a really interesting idea that we are all going to be who we will be. It's not who we were, it's who we will be. We're full of this potential. God has created this universe full of potential, and we are meant to realize our potential. Moses' potential is to be the leader of this flock, and he is now coming to realize his purpose in life. We all seek our meanings in life. It's what makes our lives a bit more interesting than just the food and the eating and the drinking and the fornicating and the basic thriving and surviving. It's who we're going to be, this big, big purpose. And each one of us has to find our purpose. We each have a different one, just as God speaks to us in our individual names. And here's God saying, I shall be, my name is, I shall be who I shall be. Echye, Asher, Echye. And he continues, say to the children of Israel, I am has sent me. What an amazing idea. I am. We are human beings. We are being something. And our name helps us in some ways to be that thing. And so I thought I would do a very small meditation on names. And so maybe for a moment, take a moment to just breathe in and breathe out. And sit comfortably wherever you are and relax a little bit. And just take a few deep breaths in and a few really deep breaths out, that letting go breath, that moment where you let go of everything and all the tensions. And just relax into yourself, your whole self, your entire body that is you. And I want us to think for a moment about names. Shemot. What's in a name? What's your name? You've got lots of names. How are you known to yourself? What do you call yourself? What do your family call you? What do your friends call you? Your school friends? Old friends? Close friends? Strangers? Human Resources Office? Lots of different names. What's your name to yourself? Does it mean something more than just a moniker? And how does other people call you and know you by your name? What name? Names mean something. We quite often have lost the meanings of names. Maybe we need to take that back. What's your name? What's the name you really want to be known by or as? What name makes you feel really yourself and alive? And can you change that in future years when you change yourself? Really, what's in a name? Is it just a label that your parents are giving you? Or is it one that you can create yourself? Take a few deep breaths and we can come back out of